Hotel Lima Echo November radio check.
Papa Echo November, good afternoon, read you 5.
Good afternoon, read you 5 as well, Papa Echo November.
The X-Zone radio and TV show is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone radio and TV show or in any manner endorsed by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, Talkstar Radio Network, its affiliated stations, or employees.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
One day it all disappeared. I'm lying in a hotel room miles away. Voices next door in my head. Where daytimes have dragged, night times worse. Hope that I can get home soon. But the half-finished bottles of inspiration lie like ghosts in my room. Where I wanna go, I know I can't stay. Well, I don't want to run feeling this way. Till I am myself. Till I am myself. Till I am myself again. There's a seat on the corner I keep every night.
And welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. Yes, we're still coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. Our email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. Exonation, my guest this hour is Rick Stack, and we're going to be talking about the secret of healing cancer and the Seth Material. Now, Rick is a former student of Jane Roberts, attended over 100 Seth sessions. He is the publisher and the editor of the Seth audio collection, the early sessions, book 1 through 9 of the Seth Material, the personal sessions, and other books by Jane Roberts. The author of Out-of-Body Adventures, 30 Days to the Most Exciting Experience of Your Life. He has been teaching workshops on Seth Material, dreams, out-of-body experiences, and metaphysics internationally for over 35 years. He worked with Jane's husband on the publication of previously unpublished Seth Material. Now, Rick has been on the faculty of many schools throughout the United States and has appeared on numerous radio and television shows. His projects include being on the board of advisors for the World Peace Festival, Berlin that is, and a global outreach program to educate and introduce people to the Seth Material. He is also the president and executive producer of the New York Dinner Theater, a theatrical production company operating in the Northeast U.S. for over 18 years. As president of New Awareness Network, Inc., he lives in Manhasset, Long Island. Here's a couple of websites, www.sethlearningcenter.org and sethcenter.com. And Rick Stack, welcome to the X-Zone. How are you tonight, Rick?
I'm doing great, and a pleasure to be here.
Rick, for our listeners who may not know who Jane Roberts is, can you tell them?
Okay. Well, Jane Roberts is an author, and Seth is the internationally acclaimed spiritual teacher who spoke through that author, Jane Roberts, while she was in a trance state. Seth coined the phrase that you may have heard, the New Age or the consciousness studies movement, you create your own reality. he was the actual one to coin that phrase. Of course, he doesn't claim that that is his alone, in that this is an age-old truth. This Seth's empowering message, many consider that he literally launched the so-called New Age movement.
Wow. Rich, you and I have to take a 2-minute commercial break. When we come back,
Sure.
I'd love you to tell us more about Seth and his message, and also talk about your book, Out of Body Adventures. Exonation, Rick Stack is my special guest this hour. He's the publisher of The Secret to Healing Cancer and The Seth Material. His websites are www.sethlearningcenter.org and sethlearningcenter.com. sethcenter.com. I'm having a hard time with my new glasses today. Sorry about that, guys. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break in 2 minutes as the X Zone continues, and I go and get my old glasses out of my office. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. I'll be back. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Rick Stack is my special guest. Websites www.sethlearningcenter.org and sethcenter.com. Rick, what is your relationship to Jane Roberts and Seth?
Well, when I was about 21 years old, I guess it was 1970-ish, and I, at that time, read a Seth book after studying metaphysics for quite a few years. I had been studying since I was like 15, 16, and I wound up, long story, but wound up being invited up to Jane Roberts' class in Elmira, New York, which is about 250 miles away from New York City. And I started going to class every week, a 500-mile trip.
Holy cow.
And I went every week for 3 years at that time, and attended Jane Roberts' class, where Seth used to come through also and teach the class, basically. So it was sort of Jane and Seth's class.
So Jane Roberts was a channel?
She was a channel, that's correct.
Okay. Now, what kind of impact did both Jane Roberts and Seth have on you? Here you are, you're in your early 20s, you're making that 500-mile trip. There had to be something very significant that was happening to you.
Well, as mentioned, many people consider Seth to be one of the major voices that launched the New Age. The thing about Seth really was the quality of his teaching, and that's why his books have withstood the test of time. There are 32 Seth books that were written, and what I could say is that Seth opened my eyes, woke me up to a spiritual growth process that started there and affected me so deeply that it changed my entire life. And Seth is not a guru. His whole thing is really to turn people back to their own resources, to realize that they have within them access to inner knowledge and to sources of information. And it's not all that hard once you start to, you don't have to go up on a mountaintop or anything. You just have to really have the desire and the intent. You can learn a few methods and stuff. And, there's certainly, he wrote 32 books on this. Obviously, it's not, just as simple as that.
Yeah.
But he began to wake me up to this concept, really, that physical reality itself, our whole life, is a training system, and that's or a school, and that's just an analogy, really, because it's more than that. But that we're here to learn certain things and to become conscious creators with all that is, with God, and to grow spiritually. And this is sort of like the ABCs. And when you finish with this whole dimension of reality, that's pretty much what you've learned is just your ABCs, and you go on from there. And of course, the details of that is what the 32 books are about. What you're supposed to learn, etc.
I was wondering if you could take us back to your classes and describe how Jane Roberts would contact or connect with Seth.
Well, Jane was, I guess, a sort of a deep trance channel, I guess you'd call her, or she would go into trance. And it was very unspooky. Everybody was sitting around talking, and Jane herself was a very sort of down-to-earth person. And she had done this many times before. She started out with a Ouija board, and progressively she heard this voice in her head and it started speaking. But it was speaking very lucidly, and the things that it had to say she found impressive. And basically she would just go into trance. She'd close her eyes, take off her glasses, because apparently Seth didn't need her glasses and could use her eyes better. That's what he's claimed anyway. I can't see what he saw, but then he would just start speaking in a different voice, though. That the voice was definitely a different quality. And then that was it. And he would run the class for a while. Then she would run the class for a while. And it was, what can I say? His teaching was such incredible quality, and I had studied just about everything before I got there, because I had been a student of religion and the origin of religion and Egyptology and the Eleusinian mysteries and the Gnosis, and you name it, I studied it. And this was like a breath of fresh air. It's unbelievable.
Where was Steph, or where is Steph that Jane was able to communicate? Was he in a different dimension? Was he in a different
according
reality?
to Seth,
Yeah.
and Seth, S-C-T-H, okay?
Right.
Physical reality itself is just one of numberless realities. In certain terms, it's an illusion. It's in that we think it's solid. We think that the table is solid, and as our physicists are telling us now, the table isn't really solid. It's 100% pure space. That's a fact that the quantum physicists are telling us. The rest is just pure whirling energy. So what we're looking at, we think that this world is solid, but it's really just an energy. It's really a miraculous energy system, and it is within a larger reality. The physical reality is not the whole ball of wax, according to Seth. And Seth resides in that inner reality, and according to him, so do we. We have an eternal soul, as you will, a higher self that lives there full time. And we have reincarnations that occur simultaneously, because our concept of time is distorted also, according to Seth, and that these reincarnational personalities are sent out and they learn and grow and until the lessons are learned, and then there's a return back to that other side. However, we also visit that other side every night in the sleep state. And one can learn, of course, to lucid dream or astral project, as it were. There's not that much difference between the two. There is some differences depending on your definition. But one can learn to leave the body now in physical reality. You don't have to wait till you die, and you can get sort of a preview. And in fact, it helps to get that preview, because you'll be far less disoriented upon physical death. So he lives on the other side, but so do we.
Who now channels Seth?
No one is channeling Seth now, although there's been many people who claim to have channeled Seth, even while Seth was around. They would call up Jane and say, "Well, I'm channeling Seth now," and Seth would go, "No, it's not me. I will not channel through anyone else but Jane Roberts." And the reason why is because otherwise no one would know who the real Seth was, and it would always be a question, who's the real Seth? And so in order to preserve the integrity of the 32 books that I'm going to go to the trouble of writing over the course of Jane's lifetime, I'm not going to channel through anybody else. But still to this day we have other people claiming, but there's not been anybody that I've seen that is remotely close to Seth's material.
Rick, why do Seth and Jane Roberts still resonate with millions of readers around the world, even after she's been gone for, over 25 years now?
Yes, and this has to do, again, with the quality of the material. Seth describes a methodology, or it's not really the methodology. He describes a spiritual growth process. The way he describes this is that the entity, or the inner self, sends a portion of itself into physical reality in order to experience this reality, for the purposes of learning, but also just for the purposes of joy and expression. That personality has to wake up on its own. It has to actualize itself. It has to understand what it is. It has to become a responsible creator. It has to understand that it creates its own reality. It has to learn how to be skillful at that. And it has to learn the basic lessons of like the love, the positive desire for love, and over destruction and hatred. And once it learns these lessons, it's going to go on to the next dimension, or whatever, the next step. And so Seth describes this in great detail as far as the actual psychology. For example, there's a book that he wrote called The Nature of Personal Reality, a book called Seth Speaks. Those are the two biggest sellers, and I certainly recommend, if anyone wants to start, that they start with Seth Speaks and The Nature of Personal Reality. But he goes into the psychology of how people create reality so thoroughly and so well that many people consider that the classic on the so-called law of attraction, or the art of manifestation. And it's not just about positive thinking. There are many people who have discovered that just by positive thinking they don't wind up getting what they want and going where they want to go. It's more complex than that. Not that it's that much more complex, but that there are missing steps here. And one of those steps has to do with knowing that you have to take action on you need to manipulate your thoughts, emotions, beliefs. So that's true. But you also need to then take action on the impulses that are going to arrive when you change your beliefs. So there's a mastery of your mind that is involved. The art of creating your reality. You create your reality according to your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, and your expectations. This is your palette. By learning to master and watch what you're thinking and then change and manipulate your thoughts, you can literally create almost any reality you want within the range of probabilities. But this must go hand in hand with a direct connection with your inner self. And each individual has that inner self, has that connection, but we have been taught, the ego has become more or less a tyrant, and has, to some considerable degree, blocked off that intuitive portion of the self. So it's always going to be this combination of those two in order to affect this spiritual growth that Seth talks about. So this message, along with all of the stuff, he goes into dreams in depth, out-of-body experiences, mass events, the probable realities and parallel universes. And this is, 30 years ago that he went into this. And although the quantum physicists were into the same stuff, the general public did not know about this. And his books on parallel universe theory, for example, are quite sophisticated. So his material was really of such great quality that to this day, the material is held up and is still not only not advanced, it's still cutting edge.
All right, Rick, stand by. Thank you very much for joining us. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. When we come back from this commercial break with the news, Richard Stack and I continue our conversation about the Seth Material. Here's a couple of websites, Exonation: www.sethlearningcenter.org and sethcenter.com. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern, here on the Talkstar Radio Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio, Euro High Definition Radio, and our broadcast affiliates worldwide. Richard Stack and I return on the other side of this news break. Don't go away. You're listening to the X Zone Radio Show, live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio, Euro High Definition Radio, and Star Cable. Our toll-free telephone number worldwide is 1-800-610-7035. Our email address, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com.
Bring it home, baby, make it so.
Sun goes down on a silky day, quarter moon walking through the Milky Way. Oh, you and me, baby, we could think of something to do. It's the right time of the night. The stars are waking above.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. My name is Rob McConnell. My guest this hour is Rick Stack, and we're talking about the Seth books. And Rick, before we went to the commercial break, we were talking about Jane Roberts and Seth, how you got involved in the in the business of publishing the books on Seth. But a question I'd like to ask you at this time is, do people need to believe in psychic phenomenon to benefit from Seth's messages?
No, you don't. I mean, the fact of the matter, it is channeled material.
Mm-hmm.
So, the material does stand on its own. You don't have to walk in, if you're interested, believing even that whether Seth exists or not. If you're someone that's interested in inner exploration, dream work, out-of-body experiences, or someone that's interested in the law of attraction, as I said, Seth was many of the authors today that actually wrote books on the law of attraction will mention the nature of personality and Seth as being one of their first books that they ever read that really woke them up to this material. So the answer in short is no, you don't have to believe in psychic abilities. But then again, psychic abilities or pure ESP,
Right.
telepathy, that kind of stuff has actually been proven in the laboratories throughout in universities throughout the world. It's old hat, and there's no question that the average person has psychic abilities.
Earlier in this interview, we discussed one of Seth's most famous remarks as, "We can change our reality." Have you ever used his techniques to change your very own reality?
Well, of course, and the principle is, you create reality according to your thoughts, your emotions, and beliefs. That the outer world is a reflection of your inner world. There are typical belief systems, and we can go into the evolution of that takes a little bit longer, but there's an official line of consciousness that came in our development, and without going into too much detail, that official line of consciousness, which has religious and scientific underpinnings, tells the individual, he's taught that you don't create your reality, that either God creates your reality or nobody creates your reality, that there's just random accidents, that the human being is actually a flawed and tainted creature, either because of original sin or because he's just the survival of the fittest and Darwinian thought we're just really animals, and that the universe is really not a safe place. There's enemies that can hit you from without or from within even, and you could get struck by cancer or disease or crime or accidents at any time. This is what we're taught.
Yeah.
Now, those belief systems then create the reality that we see in the world. And they result in a lot of problems, for example, disease and war, etc. Okay, the individual can learn to change their beliefs. And there are very simple ways of doing this. You learn you get what you concentrate upon. There is no other main rule. So that's the law of attraction. This law is immutable. It works. It always works. Whatever you focus on, you're going to get in whatever world you find yourself in, till you figure that out. So you learn to manipulate your thoughts, And this has to do with a combination of listening to your inner self to help you guide you in the selection of this of your beliefs, going along with that information, going along and giving yourself up to the spontaneity of your being, and also manipulating your beliefs. So a person, in this theory, if a person really believes that it's a dog-eat-dog world and is concentrating on those kind of thoughts, they're going to literally bring events into their life that reflect that. If a person changes their belief to believe that the universe is really fundamentally a good place, that what they are inside of them is good, and that humanity, although it has its problems, and although there's crazy people or people that are at an early stage of development, but humanity itself deep down is good. When you focus on that, then you will attract into your life events, literally events, that will demonstrate that to you. If you believe that you're worthy, then you're going to attract things that will reflect that. If you believe your universe is safe, then you're going to attract things that reflect that. If you believe it's hard to make a buck in this world, it's going to be hard to make a buck.
Let me ask you this then, Rick, and I hope you take what I'm going to say with a little bit of a grain of salt. Seth said, and this is a quote, "If you're in poverty, you can instead find yourself surrounded by abundance." Now, how can those starving in Africa relate to this particular teaching?
Okay, so you have a situation where, and this is in other parts of the material, that some people find themselves in birth conditions that are very harsh. So you might be born into an impoverished family in Africa or something. Now, according to Seth, there is no accident that occurred. So that the individual in concert with their inner self, and that goes into a long, that's a big discussion about the mechanics of that. But according to Seth, that there's no accident that somebody finds himself in an impoverished family in Africa, or they wind up a son of the Rockefellers. And you can almost feel that intuitively that this is just not an accident. Okay, and we're not putting a value judgment saying that one is worse, one is bad, or one is good.
Right.
Because according to Seth, people reincarnate in such a manner that they're going to experience these different things until they learn compassion for everyone and understand that we're all one. And if somebody's starving on this planet, in certain terms, we're all starving. Now, that being given, after childhood ends, according to Seth, an individual within the range of probabilities, within a range of what's possible, they can change their reality. So that someone who is poor can change and become abundant. Now, if they are if they're born into this situation, then there's reasons why they set up these challenges, and in order for that person to pull out of that situation, they're probably going to have to do some fancy footwork in terms of changing their beliefs. But the theory is indeed, and if you go to almost any country in the world, and it could be as poverty-stricken as you want, there are going to be individuals in that village or in that town that do pull themselves out of poverty. Anywhere you go, there'll be some who do. Now and those people. Well, Seth would say there's no accident and it's not just that they were just smarter, that this had to do with their beliefs. And on the other hand, if you take a look at a global perspective, if you have an entire country that has tremendous poverty in it, that is a reflection of the beliefs of the country, but it's also a reflection of the beliefs of the world. That the world is letting that happen. That there are such dramatic abundance in one area and such poverty in the other, or that we're spending so much resources on weapons, for example, instead of spending resources on quality of life, or that we're messing up the fisheries and the forests instead of us having a more sane planet. So I think more and more we're realizing that whatever's going on one side of the planet is really affected deeply by global belief systems, really.
All right,
That's saying these belief systems are what the problem is, and that people need to become aware of who and what they are. And what we really are, according to Seth, are baby gods.
All right, so tell
According
me,
to Seth,
me.
we're all gods in training.
All right, so tell me,
sorry,
how do we break the circle, or how do we break free from stubborn cultural beliefs?
Okay, so there's really these two ways. Okay, first of all, you learn the technology. There's a technology involved in manipulating a belief. So if you're sitting there telling yourself all day long that what you are is ugly or fat or poor, you're giving yourself these suggestions. You're literally hypnotizing yourself. And according to Seth, a thought is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
A thought is an electromagnetic energy pattern. And so that electromagnetic pattern will literally go out into the matrix and pull in a reality. So what you learn to manipulate your beliefs, and that might be literally taking 5 minutes. Well, actually, you got to take some time to just examine what your beliefs are first. First, you got to discover what your beliefs are, and then after you discover what your beliefs are, you deliberately change them. And you might do a belief exercise or a self-hypnosis exercise to change your habitual thought patterns. But the other side of that equation is Seth spends a lot of time teaching people how to connect with their inner self, both during the day, and that has to do with really listening to your own voice, listening to your own intuition, trusting that you have that voice, going along with the flow of your spontaneous being, the joy of your being. In a way, it's abandoning yourself to the power and strength of your life, and for the ego to stop trying to control everything and to try to open up to that inner self. But it also involves sort of a kind of a meditative techniques that Seth calls side time, where you're deliberately taking some time to go inward. And it also, Seth talks extensively about entering in the inner reality through the dream state. So he will teach, Seth teaches lucid dream techniques and techniques for astral projection. And as you know, I wrote a book on out-of-body experiences. Yes. It was based on my material, based on my experience with Seth and other stuff before. And my book, Out-of-Body Adventures, has been in print for over 25 years. And one of the reasons why, and it's really a manual for how to get out of the body. And one of the reasons why it's still in existence and why it's been around is because I have an entire section on working with beliefs, on creating the climate in order to get out of body. Because basically, as long as you're frightened, and many people are, because there's an underlying fear in the belief systems mentioned in this culture, where people don't really believe that the universe is really a safe place. And as long as you believe that or are focusing on negativity in any way, it interferes with you being able to really sort of go gallivanting outside your physical body.
Rick,
but the fact of the matter is that we can go gallivanting outside of our physical body. And let me tell you that 15% of the general population will have an out-of-body experience before they die.
All right, Rick, I'd like to ask you what Seth teaches about the current religious philosophies that are prevalent in today's society.
Okay. Well, I mean, Seth goes into this at length, and, I certainly don't want to give this too cursory. And by the way, we should leave a few minutes for the secret to healing cancer, since you mentioned it at the beginning.
Yeah, we're going to do that after we come back from the break.
Okay, good. Okay. So what Seth would say is that, and he goes into this at length, is that basically religion, which is, of course, is man's desire to understand God,
Right.
Religion has always been a direct reflection of how developed human beings are. So, for example, what he describes the development of the ego consciousness. And the ego consciousness, this is a long story, but just to make it short, Seth says that the ego consciousness is a good thing in a way, and we were meant to have an ego consciousness. It's supposed to grow and develop and join with the inner self, but that it became overdeveloped and overspecialized. And what happens is that we had a dominating ego that became a tyrant. So then we had a God, you see, that was reflection of our own ego. So we had a God that was dominating and a bit got angry easily, that was male, because before that time there were a lot of female gods. And so that basically our religions are a reflection of how advanced we are. Now, there is, according to Seth, there is God. There is all that is. You know, Jesus Christ was a teacher. But according to Seth, you know, Jesus Christ was, and these other teachers and Buddha, they were teaching stuff that they understood. But, you know, what humans went ahead and did with that teaching, well, we know, for example, in Christianity, we know we had the Crusades,
yes.
We know we had the Inquisition, and he's not putting down religion, but he's saying that human beings have taken religion in directions that the teachers obviously didn't mean you to go in, and then he describes that we're at a point now where certain parts of those religious beliefs we have to start moving beyond. For example, the belief that man is sinful, or that he can't be trusted, or that, or from the scientific viewpoint, you get almost the same thing. I mean, our religions have taught us to worship God, but they haven't really taught us to love the God within us.
All right, stand by, Rick. You and I have to take our final break.
Sure.
Exonation, Rick Stack is my special guest. Here's a couple of websites. www.sethlearningcenter.org and sethcenter.com. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Rick Stack, and I will be back on the other side of this short break. Don't go away.
The stars are waking above. It's the right time of the night. The moment I wake up, before I put on my makeup, I say a little prayer for you. While combing my hair now, and wondering what dress to wear now, I say a little prayer for you.
Exonation, Rick Stack is my special guest this hour. www.sethlearningcenter.org and sethcenter.com. Rick, during the hour, I've been also talking about the secret to healing cancer and the Seth Material. Tell me about the secret to healing cancer.
This is a book that my company publishes, written by Dr. Su, who is a Taiwanese doctor. He was a medical doctor, then he became a psychiatrist, then he became the head of Taipei General Hospital Psychiatry Division for a while. And what he's been doing is he's been treating cancer and other physical and mental illnesses using the principles of the Seth Material. And those principles, and he's been getting such incredible results, basically helping people to heal themselves, that he's getting really famous over there, and basically it's extremely difficult even to get an appointment with him. His clinic, he has a Seth clinic over there that's absolutely filled. Now the principle, of course, is because since you create your reality,
right,
that means that if you're ill, you created that too. And that illness is a reflection of what's going on is your immune system is no longer functioning the way it usually does. For example, Dr. Su mentions that cancer cells are produced in the body every day, but those cancer cells are eliminated naturally by the body. They're killed off, and the body's immune system just handles them. Well, at one point along the line, the immune system is not functioning well when somebody gets a serious illness. And according to Dr. Su and according to Seth, this is because there is a problem within the psyche. And that's often caused by the very beliefs that we were talking about. When people don't believe that they have power, when they don't believe that the universe is safe, when they have fear, when they don't believe that what they are is good, deep down. This results in a whole lifestyle where they might wind up repressing certain things, repressing emotions, or having a lifetime that's not really filled with joy, but might be filled with blocks. And at a certain point, if those blocks get too much and people are blocking their energy and their joy and wind up feeling hopeless within themselves, for example, just because they're in a marriage that they hate, or because they're in a job that they hate, or because they have they just got fired from their job, or a myriad of stress problems, and this has been demonstrated in the field of psychoneuroimmunology, the connection between societal factors and psychological factors and illness. Of course, they're still investigating it, and they're going to be doing so for quite some time because the medical profession is a little bit slow to catch up with the research. But this is what the position is. If you have an illness, if you have cancer or any serious illness, it didn't just hit you accidentally. That it happened as a result of a reflection of an inner problem. And no one should be ashamed of those inner problems. The whole planet is working through these inner problems, but these same inner problems manifest in different ways.
Rick, I hate to do this, but we've run out of time for tonight. I want to thank you ever so much for joining us. We'll have to have you back on in the future to continue this fascinating discussion about Seth and yourself, and it's truly amazing. Rick Stack has been my guest this hour. X-Zone Nation, www.sethlearningcenter.org and sethcenter.com. I'll be back on the other side of the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as the X-Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.